America at war, barreling toward Baghdad. Fast-moving U.S. ground forces fight their way to within miles of the capital. Up above, air raids try to cut up and cut off Iraqi divisions. Iraq insists Saddam is alive, well, and in control. Was Saddam hiding chemical weapons here? Captured Iraqi soldiers were prepared for chemical warfare. And a major new terror alert. The FBI says we must find this man.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather. Tonight, continuing coverage of America at War.
Good evening. It is night 6 of the war in Iraq. The battle for Baghdad draws nearer. Here are the latest developments. U.S. Army ground forces are now about 50 miles or less from the Iraqi capital. They are using missiles, fixed-wing aircraft, and attack helicopters against one of Saddam Hussein's elite Republican Guard divisions. Pilots describe a hornet's nest of enemy fire over that battlefield. One chopper was down. Iraqi TV showed 2 prisoners said to be its crew. Heavy airstrikes just south of Baghdad also appear aimed at the Republican Guards. The U.S. commander, Army General Tommy Franks, says progress has been, quote, rapid and dramatic. Behind the main advance, U.S. and British troops are battling some pockets of often fierce Iraqi resistance from irregulars. The U.S. is protesting Iraq's treatment of American POWs. President Bush plans to ask Congress for more than $70 billion to pay for the war and domestic counterterrorism. President Bush also accused Russia of putting U.S. troops at risk by selling prohibited weapons to Iraq. We have CBS News correspondents deployed with troops and at other key locations around the world to bring you solid war coverage. There's a late development about the war in Washington. CBS News national security correspondent David Martin has it. David?
Dan, U.S. officials say the Iraqis have drawn a red line on the map around Baghdad, and once American troops cross it, the Republican Guards are authorized to use chemical weapons.
This is what Baghdad looked like to a Navy pilot when the air campaign began. The explosions are spectacular and were meant to shock the Iraqis into surrendering without a fight. But the Iraqis have not surrendered, and those flashes of anti-aircraft fire coming up at the planes are still coming up. And now 2 American pilots have been captured. It's not clear what forced their Apache helicopter down just 50 miles south of Baghdad, but the 2 pilots are already being displayed on Iraqi TV.
We know what it feels like now to be shot at, and I will tell you, sir, it makes us more determined.
Lieutenant Colonel Dan Williams was one of the leaders of the Apache raids against the Medina division of the Republican Guards.
It is one of the best of the Republican Guard divisions, one of the most powerful of the Republican Guard divisions. I am sure that it has been degraded significantly in the last 48 hours or so.
British Prime Minister Blair told the House of Commons what the Americans are trying to do.
As we speak, they are about 60 miles south of Baghdad, near Kabbalah. It is a little way from there that they will encounter the Medina division of the Republican Guard, who are defending the route to Baghdad. This will plainly be a crucial moment.
Here is Karbala, and here is the 3rd Infantry Division, a force heavy with tanks. Behind them is the 101st Airborne Division, ready to conduct a helicopter assault into the rear of the Republican Guards. U.S. military officers say the race to Baghdad is an attempt to end the war as soon as possible, but at the risk of leaving the rear exposed, which is exactly what happened in An-Naziriyah Sunday, when both the Army and Marines suffered their worst casualties.
That helicopter to land now. We got a critical patient needs to get out of here.
On our defensive side, on the Gulf side, they got flanked and it went unleashed. There must have been tons of them because I just heard walls of fire, mortars, everything.
Once the sandstorm clears out of the way, the Battle of Baghdad could begin, and there is every indication the Iraqis intend to make a fight of it. Dan?
David Martin reporting live from the Pentagon. Facts on the ground indicate that overall, from a military standpoint, the invasion continues to go well. With that as the context, we take you to the front lines. CBS's Jim Axelrod is with the U.S. Army's heavyweight 3rd Infantry Division, an armored mechanized unit driving toward Baghdad. Jim filed this report from somewhere south of the Iraqi Shiite holy city of Karbala tonight. That's about 50 miles south of the capital.
Never have so many troops moved so far, so fast. But during its historic push, the 3rd Infantry didn't just drive. They battled as well, taking on pockets of resistance and capturing hundreds of Iraqi soldiers.
One of the majors spoke English. He told us that their government had been telling them when we got here, even if they gave up, we're going to kill them.
But as the Iraqis discover humane treatment, they've been sharing information.
Yeah, we're learning all kinds of things about this regime and this enemy and this terrain, and that's all very useful.
Take the captured weapons displayed this morning. The guns are old, but look at the gas masks.
It's like a regular chemical protective mask. It was made in 2002.
Brand new, as were the decontamination kits and atropine used to treat exposure to nerve agents.
I would guess that they're planning on using chemical warfare. They may or may not use it, but they're ready for it.
But it's not just the captured gas masks raising concerns about the possible use of chemical weapons. This picture of Saddam marks the entrance to an Iraqi weapons depot. Another captured Iraqi has told Army officers that while conventional weapons are stored here, he has reason to believe chemical weapons are stored here as well.
This afternoon, the Army sent its chemical detection units to the depot.
This will look up any chemical contamination.
Specialist Steve Moore sat in one of the foxes, as they're called, sniffing with high-tech sensors from miles away before sending others in for a hands-on search.
The other team's going to go in and they're going to detect for liquid contamination, and if there's any vapor there that's not detected by this, they'll pick it up over there.
That won't happen until tomorrow, leaving the question hanging if the Army has finally discovered what it came so far to find. Jim Axelrod, CBS News, with the 3rd Infantry in Iraq.
While U.S.-led forces keep moving north, they do still have some trouble behind in places like Nasiriyah, where 10 U.S. Marines died in a battle that began yesterday. 50 were wounded, several are still missing. The Pentagon said today Nasiriyah is now under U.S. control, but CBS's John Roberts, who is there, reporting from the edge of the city, tells us the battle is still being fought tonight.
The Marines paid a heavy price in Nasiriyah, measured in both human lives and significant delays to their battle plan. The shooting started Sunday when a battalion of Marines pushed through a city they believed had already fallen. But members of Saddam Hussein's feared Fedayeen militia, who had made indications that they were going to surrender, suddenly picked up their weapons and opened fire, cutting a Marine column to pieces. Some Marines expressed anger today that they were waved off of any danger in Nasiriyah, that the Army's 3rd Infantry Division had come through the city on Saturday and declared it safe. They are also enraged that the Iraqi government put pictures of the American POWs being interrogated on television. After 30 hours of wearying house-to-house fighting on the streets of Nasiriyah, the Marines decided to do it their way, sending a massive column of tanks and armor north toward the city. But while the Pentagon says the Marines now control Nasiriyah, the glow of mortars and artillery still lights up the night sky. The fighting has thrown the movement of thousands of troops and vehicles toward the north significantly off course, and it has thrown a shock into the Marines, who now call the area where their comrades were killed Mogadishu Alley, a reference to the disaster in Somalia, where 18 U.S. Rangers lost their lives. John Roberts, CBS News, with the Marines in southern Iraq.
Besides ridding Iraq of chemical and other outlawed weapons, main goals of the war include bringing Iraqis freedom and food. To do that, Allied forces need to secure the small but important Gulf port of Qasr to establish a relief supply line. CBS's Scott Pelley is covering the battle for full control of Qasr.
Securing the vital port of Qasr has been a tougher fight than expected. U.S. Marines and British forces swept into the port days ago, but they are still taking fire from small, determined bands of Iraqi troops. Marine Captain Rick Crevier told us they're Saddam Hussein's Special Republican Guard using special guerrilla tactics.
It appears that their modus operandi is to dress up in civilian clothes, wave white flags so we don't shoot at them, but then they get in their bunkers and they shoot at us.
Qasr is Iraq's deep-water port, essential to military supplies and desperately needed humanitarian aid. The Navy is finding sea mines here hidden on civilian boats. Captain Mike Tollotson worries that the Iraqis planted the mines without U.S. spy satellites noticing.
It appears that the Iraqis have been relatively ingenious in the way they have disguised their mine laying capability.
Mines like these crippled 2 U.S. warships in 1991. Tomorrow, the Navy plans to use trained dolphins to hunt for the mines in the harbor. In the southern oil fields, sporadic resistance chased away American civilian firefighters today. They said they felt like sitting ducks. Captain Crevier says it's tougher than he expected, but even after days of battle, he doesn't expect it to last.
Why do you think they'll capitulate soon? They can only stand so much of our artillery. Quickly, you start to understand that there's no other alternative but to capitulate or to surrender.
If that's coming, it won't be too soon for the port. Dock workers won't come back here until they feel secure. Today, U.S. Marines who were guarding the port flew north to fresh combat, leaving behind British Royal Marines who will fight building to building to dig out the small but determined opposition. Scott Pelley, CBS News, Qasr, Iraq.
And with Qasr not yet fully secured as a supply line for vital relief aid, the International Red Cross is warning a humanitarian disaster is now in the making nearby in Iraq's second largest city, the big port of Basra. More than 1 million people live in Basra. With sporadic combat in and around Basra, there have been widespread power blackouts, and the city's main drinking water system is out. The backup system is described as not always reliable or safe. It's become the big guessing game of the war. Is Saddam Hussein alive or dead? CBS's Mark Phillips reports there was a big new clue today, a new Saddam appearance on Iraqi television. Apparently tape recorded, but when was it recorded?
They bombed the bunker he was thought to be in, and Saddam or someone like him popped up on Iraqi TV. They blasted his capital and his palaces for 4 more days, and Saddam or someone like him popped up on Iraqi TV. Today's Saddam seemed less bloated, and his vision seems to have improved from last week. The glasses were gone, but the defiance was still there. As he spoke to his troops, he seemed neither shocked, nor awed, nor ready to give up.
So hit them now as you have been ordered, hit them below the necks and strike them hard.
Saddam's reference to recent fighting seemed designed to make this appearance seem current. He singled out commanders in Basra and Qasr for commendation, for example.
I am thankful in the Battle of Qasr to him and all the people that did well. In Basra, persevere, brothers, victory is near.
But fighting in Iraq's deep south could have been anticipated well before this war began. There was no conclusive evidence as to when today's appearance may have been recorded.
There is still the possibility of Saddam Hussein's people issuing tape recording. We're well aware that he spent many hours recently tape recording various messages.
Since the initial bombing, speculation about Saddam's well-being has abounded, that he was dead or wounded or needed a blood transfusion. In terms of the battle, the coalition's commander says it really doesn't matter.
This is not about one man. This is about an oppressive regime.
A regime that knows it's fighting for its life, and one that Saddam said today is fighting this war according to its plan. Give up in the desert, resist around the towns, and above all, drag things out. If the U.S. and Britain want a short war, Saddam wants a long one. Patience, he said over and over again today. Patience. Dan.
Mark Phillips reporting live from Kuwait City. Coming up next year on the CBS Evening News, American POWs in Iraq. Their families back home, waiting, hoping, praying. Iraqi television showed pictures today of 2 Americans, it said, with the captured crew of an Apache helicopter downed south of Baghdad. They are now identified as Ronald Young, Jr. of Georgia and David Williams of Florida, both based out of Fort Hood, Texas. One can only imagine and empathize with their fear and anxiety and that of their families. The same goes for the first 5 American POWs captured earlier and their families back at Fort Bliss, Texas. CBS's Vince Gonzalez is there.
They are the grim faces of this new war, the first American POWs, injured men and women forced to do interviews on Iraqi television. They haven't been seen since this tape was first broadcast by the Arab news channel Al Jazeera.
What's your name?
Joseph Hudson's mother didn't even know he was in Iraq until she turned on her television.
I was so glad and worried that I saw my son that being interviewed, because there's only mean one thing, he's still standing and alive.
There are 5 known POWs from the Army's lightly armed 507th Maintenance Company, mechanics and repair crews based at Fort Bliss in El Paso. The unit took a wrong turn during fighting around Al Nazariya and was ambushed.
What's your name?
Even wounded, Edgar Hernandez was forced to talk, as was Shoshana Johnson, who joined the Army as a cook. Her family has special fears for her safety.
She's a lone female. I do not know where she would be in respect to the fellas. I do know that in the country, such as that women are treated differently.
You come to kill Iraqi people?
Patrick Miller told the Iraqis he was, in his words, just there to fix stuff. His family back in Kansas still can't believe he was captured.
It just tore me up inside. I mean, I didn't think it could be my brother, but it was.
Jeffrey Fox knows what the captured Americans could be in for. He was a POW during the first Gulf War.
There were times where you were just sitting on a chair, handcuffed and blindfolded, where they would come up and literally beat you up, and that's when I had my right eardrum was broken.
Why do you come from Texas to Iraq?
I hope the President of the United States will do something about the people that has been captured. I want them to get them out.
The White House promises that everything possible is being done and warns anyone who mistreats Americans will be considered a war criminal. Dan?
Vince Gonzalez reporting live from Fort Bliss, Texas. Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, a new and urgent warning from the FBI. This man could be plotting a major terror attack inside the United States. You'll hear from his family. On the terror trail, the U.S. government is now publicly talking up a global hunt for an alleged al-Qaeda foot soldier who it is said may be planning an attack inside the United States. CBS News correspondent Bob Orr is covering the search for a terror suspect who has family in Florida.
4 days after issuing a worldwide alert for Adnan el-Shukri Juma, the FBI today made an urgent and unusual public plea for help in finding the suspected al-Qaeda operative.
He's being identified by senior members of the al-Qaeda organization as a very, very, very serious threat to the United States interests, both here and abroad.
The FBI first became aware of the 27-year-old Saudi while investigating the 9/11 attacks, and sources say el-Shukri Juma's name recently surfaced again, first in a document recovered in Afghanistan, and then during the interrogation of al-Qaeda kingpin Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. El-Shukri Juma's father, who lives near Miami, says his son lived in Florida in the late 90s, but left about 3 years ago. His family says the last time they heard from him, several months ago, el-Shukri Juma was living in Morocco. His brother Nabil says el-Shukri Juma is a computer engineer, and he's baffled by the FBI's terror bulletin.
I think that my brother is like a normal person, and when it's something like that, comes through, that means that that makes me feel that America is a really safe place, because my brother would never do something like that.
The FBI says el-Shukri Juma was a friend of a Pakistani man convicted last year of planning to bomb Florida power plants and a National Guard armory. While el-Shukri Juma is not charged with any crime, the FBI says his apparent association with multiple al-Qaeda figures makes him a likely threat. The FBI says it's received now about 200 tips since issuing the alert for el-Shukri Juma. Meanwhile, since the start of the war, agents have interviewed some 5,000 Iraqis now living in the U.S. We're told about 30 have been detained on immigration charges, but sources say the interviews have produced nothing at all, pointing to terrorism. Dan?
Bob Orr in our Washington bureau. The Wall Street bubble of optimism about the war burst a bit today, coming off its best week in 2 decades. The Dow plunged more than 300 points this day, and it's now back in negative territory for the year. There's more CBS News coming right up.
Good
We give you an update now on the war headlines at this hour. CBS News has been told that the U.S. command believes if U.S. forces cross a certain line around Baghdad, Saddam's Republican Guards may attack with chemical weapons. This news came as some Allied units are near Karbala, that's about 50 miles south of Baghdad. U.S. officials report progress in the war, despite some enemy resistance and some casualties. Iraq showed pictures of a downed Apache helicopter near Baghdad, then showed the captured two-man crew, now identified as Ronald Young Jr. and David Williams, both based at Fort Hood, Texas. The Red Cross warns a power and water supply disaster is coming in Basra, Iraq's second largest city and biggest port. President Bush is asking for more than $70 billion to pay for the war. That includes relief aid. And Britain's Prime Minister Tony Blair will meet President Bush here in the United States Wednesday and Thursday. Some CBS stations are returning now to local programming. For most of you, there's more of the CBS Evening News straight ahead, so stay here with us.
This is CBS.